There's an argument which has been wheeled out many times, and I'm really grateful to Gary Hutton 2654 for wheeling it out again, because it gives me an opportunity to respond to it. He says, the UK says this war by Russia is wrong. Indeed it is. Was the UK not involved in a war in Iraq and Afghanistan? So those combat missions were okay even as we speak. The UK sells arms, highly sophisticated weapons to dubious countries in Africa and Saudi Arabia. This is like Yes Minister, popular TV show. Well, the point is that if something is seen to be wrong in the past, then it doesn't justify what Russia does now, does it? We learn. The fact that the UK or NATO made a mistake in the past means that we should not do so in the future. And indeed, there's a lengthy briefing process by NATO that goes on regularly to ensure that any future engagement avoids the mistakes of the past and that lessons are learned. And more than that, in the case of Afghanistan, Russia was engaged in many of these debriefing sessions over Afghanistan. So you cannot go back in time and justify another act of stupidity, this time by Russia, with an appeal to a stupid act in the past. Similarly, stupid acts now. You cannot say, well, it's stupid to be arming these people in Africa with our sophisticated weapons. Does that justify the arming of Russia? No, it doesn't. At the moment, Russia is busy trying to get arms from North Korea and from Iran. And I suspect also from China, though China is being very cagey about what it actually says and does. But none of that justifies. So none of the stupidity of the West justifies the stupidity of Russia. And ideally, we stop playing around with these arms races. We stop playing around with this aggression. There is an absolute truth here, and it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be reaching for it. The fact that we have stupid players in a variety of different countries doesn't mean that we can't identify what the actual correct position should be. The correct position is that a country should not be invaded by an aggressive neighbour. Full stop. And therefore, Russia is wrong. Therefore, the Kremlin is wrong. Therefore, Putin is wrong. Putin is the aggressive invader. Everything else is dependent on that fact. If we don't accept that fact, then we're living in some sort of cloud cuckoo land which rewards invasion. The last time I went to Moscow, I think, I don't think I'd fully taken in the invasion of Crimea. And it hit me when I went up to the rector's office in the university, and there was a large map of Russia on the wall, a sort of relief map. It was very pretty, and I've seen it many times. And this time, the area marked out as Russia, the area painted in whatever colour it was, I can't remember, what now included Crimea. And I think it was at that point that I decided I had to quit. And I don't think I've been back since. I think that was the time. And I had meetings in the rector's office to decide what my new office, what my new chair would look like. And I met my new secretary and all this other sort of rubbish. And I never went back. I never went back. Partly because I got distracted by television here in the UK, partly because I was overexposed, partly because I was given advice that it would be extremely dangerous to go back to Russia after having been so exposed on Channel 4, given the Russian laws, but also partly because I was looking for a way out and I didn't feel comfortable with the map on the wall showing Crimea as part of the Russian Empire. I didn't feel comfortable with that at all. And I was increasingly being wheeled out to meet the great and the, I was going to say the great and the good, but that alliteration doesn't really work when you're shaking hands with Pyotr Tolstoy, the man who looks like a toad. Well, I mean, he doesn't have all the pustules and warts on his face, but he's growing into his personality. He's the great-great-grandson of Lev Tolstoy, the wonderful writer. But Pyotr Tolstoy is a toad and responsible for egging up the anti-gay legislation in the Duma, and was also, certainly on my meeting, very keen to point out that he had personally called out the Jewish people who were targeting Orthodox churches and desecrating them, and that was rot. It is complete rubbish, and he thought it was something that a foreigner would be interested in, and a foreigner would slap him on the back and say, "Well done, you xenophobic slob, well done." I'm not congratulating somebody for being a racist and for being an anti-Semite and for being a bigot, and I'm not going to change my views. I think Russia under Putin is wrong, and there are many, many, many Russians who are suffering because of that. I remember one particular person called Maxim who went into exile. I know many others who have fled to Israel, to Germany, to Istanbul. There are many good Russians. There are many who don't have the money to flee, who have simply battened down the hatches and are keeping quiet. And there are many who've been forced into the army against their will. Russia is full of incredibly good people, noble people, kind people, but it is ruled by a gang of thugs. And we need to name them, and we need to be clear about what we're saying. And the fact that there are other thugs and twits around Europe and the US doesn't change the fact that Russia is full of twits and has invaded another country. It doesn't change that fact. And we need to make that really clear.